Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
Well, we come to you today with a tribute episode. Sadly, Donald Sutherland, a longtime actor of the silver screen, as well as a lot of horror movies that we've ended up doing, many mainstream ones actually, recently passed away. And we were sad to hear that, but I think that we knew of only one movie that we could... You were like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? It's time. We've been talking about doing this one for quite a long time. And we'd already done Don't Look Now, which would have been my only other suggestion, really. I mean, he's been in a number of horror movies. It's interesting. He's kind of one of those actors that sometimes when we do these tributes, there's these great actors that we know from so much stuff, but we have a really hard time finding a horror movie that they've been in. Maybe they've only done once or twice. This guy didn't shy away from any role, really. I feel like he's played a lot of different characters, a lot of different, his career, he was born in 1935. His career spanned 6 decades. He's Canadian. I didn't realize that. I thought he was American. And of course, his son, Kiefer Sutherland, is one of his more famous children. And I read that Kiefer Sutherland said, my dad, he just loves acting and was a big inspiration for him getting into acting, just his passion for the craft.
I think all his kids are actors.
They are they?
I think so.
I don't even know. I only know Kiefer. I actually ran into Kiefer Sutherland in Vegas once.
What?
Yeah.
Was he an asshole? I've kind of heard he's an asshole.
He was surrounded by a posse. He's super short, which is so funny because his father is super tall.
Oh, yeah.
They were walking around, and so we kind of bumped into him and kind of said hi, but I was too embarrassed to, approach him, I just don't feel...
Oh, my God, it's Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah, right. So we kind of ran. I was like, hey, hi, I'm a fan of your work. He's like, oh, hey, thanks. But, he was on his way to the blackjack table.
Right.
And he and his little posse sat down at the blackjack table, but there were 2 or 3 empty seats. And me and the guys I was with were like, what if we just went over and sat down or stood up? Do you think they'd shoo us away, or are they fun-loving people? I don't know. Just the vibes he was giving off, I was kind of like, yeah, probably not.
Yeah,
we'll probably move on.
I mean no disrespect, Kiefer Sutherland, if you're listening to this. I'm a big fan of your work. I've just kind of heard you might kind of be an asshole. That's fine. Whatever.
Yeah, it's okay. We're here to talk about your father.
We're here to talk about your dad. I'm a fan of Donald Sutherland, but he's just one of those people that we've talked about before. He's just that guy who's kind of always been around, and he's in a lot of stuff, and he's always good.
Yeah.
He's really versatile. I'm not surprised that he did. I'm not surprised that he didn't shy away from any role, but specifically in horror or sci-fi, I would say Invasion of the Body Snatchers is definitely horror, but it's sci-fi too. The premise is very sci-fi. He has a really unique look.
Yes.
I wouldn't even go so far to say as he's handsome. He's very tall.
Yeah.
That's cool. But he just a very distinctive look. And what I was, even in this movie, I don't know why, but he just has this great sex appeal. I don't get it. I don't understand why. But they do close-ups on his face, and he gives looks to the person he's talking to. I'm like, oh my God, you are so hot. What?
That's funny. I never thought of him that way, but he does. I've always thought of him as either a little goofy or a little scary.
Yeah.
Depending on the role he's in. He has this intensity that is, it's this is a man I don't want to cross. But if he's not mad at me, I feel like he could be so much fun and he might be my best friend.
Oh, yeah.
That's the vibe I feel like he gives off. And it really just depends on the role that he's in, how I take in his presence,
He can be very sinister, and I like that. I think most young people know him from the Hunger Games series.
Yeah.
He can be sinister or jovial. I don't know. I've seen him in a lot of things. For whatever reason, one of the main things that I remember him from is Animal House.
Oh, I forgot he was in that.
My parents let me watch Animal House.
That's crazy. My parents forbid me from watching them. Kept me from watching that movie.
Wasn't he kind of a cool professor? And he was sleeping with one of his students. I don't know. He was sexy in that.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I looked into his backstory. I'm like, oh, I'm sure this guy has a great backstory. And he does, but his backstory is just that he was into acting and he pursued it and he did well and he kept getting roles and he just kept getting more and more successful. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even feel like there's like a big break, you know,
No.
like he was just doing it. You know, he studied acting. He got dual degree in acting and engineering, but then, you know, he went to London and was working on the West End, and then he started getting film roles, so he moved to Los Angeles, and his career just skyrocketed. Like,
Yeah.
he just has the most amazing trajectory. Like, I think it's not luck. He's not one of these guys that just got lucky. It just so happens that he's a really talented guy.
He is. And I mean, like most actors, you know, he started out in theater and maybe getting some small roles in TV and films, I think in a lot of British stuff. But I think it's cool that his first big film break was alongside Christopher Lee in a couple horror movies for Hammer, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors and The Castle of the Living Dead in 1964 and 1965. He was in Die, Die, My Darling, another Hammer movie. You know, that's really apropos for what we're talking about here. But then, of course, he just went on to do a whole bunch of other stuff. I think it was his role in MASH in 1970. He was Hawkeye Pierce.
That was the big one.
Yeah, the movie.
But he was already doing well, you know, like,
Yeah.
he was a working actor. I mean, so many people, you know, struggle like waiting tables and whatnot. Based on the little bit of research that I did about him, it just seemed like he was just doing fine. You know, he was working consistently.
He's in Don't Look Now in 1973, which we did. And I don't remember exactly how you liked. I think you were a bit mixed on that. I love that movie.
I liked it. I liked him in it. It was weird. He was really good in it.
He was. That's one of these movies that just haunt me. I think about that movie and it just gets me emotional, especially now that I'm a father, because that movie deals so much with the pain of a family that loses a son. And he's just so intense. And I look back at that one scene in that movie where he picks his son up out of the water and is just wails.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Like, it brings me to tears just thinking about that. I just buy it 100%. And it's awful. And then he was in a Fellini movie 3 years later as Casanova. You say he's sexy. And then he goes on to be in Kentucky Fried Movie and Animal House and then this movie, you know, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I think Animal House was the same year as this one. And then he was also the same year doing The Great Train Robbery with Sean Connery. These are three big movies. Yeah. If you want to steal someone's acting career, steal this guy's.
I know. and worked, you know, he was working when he passed, sadly, at 88 and still getting around and working. Like, that is a life well lived. Like, kudos.
Right? It's amazing.
Yeah. He's just, he's got this amazing voice, and I don't know, he just has kind of a calmness and a stillness about him that is just really effective and magnetic. I'm not a bit surprised. You come across these people sometimes, these unicorns that are just brilliant at doing it. I went to college with a girl who was one of those people. She was just amazing. She could do anything. She could disappear into any role. And then she grew up and became an adult and doesn't do that anymore. But I feel like he's just so natural. He just makes every role his own. But we should get to talking about this movie because I can't. Oh, God, I feel like I say this all the time like I'm a broken record. Like, I can't believe I haven't seen this. But I can't believe I haven't seen this. Is this the first time you're seeing it too?
Oh, God, I am so sorry to say this. And this has been on my list for years. And this is a movie that even my dad has talked about picking up before. Like, I remember when I was a kid, he's like, oh, we need to watch Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I never did. Now, that said, I have seen the original.
I have not, but I've seen at least one of the later ones.
Oh, yeah, because this has been adapted, 5 or 6 times in one way or another?
Yeah.
It's all based on an original novel by Jack Finney. W.D. Richter wrote the screenplay for this one, and he's done a number of science fiction novels that I think several of them have been made into movies. This one probably the most famous. He did another novel called Time and Time Again that deals with time travel and stuff like that. But this movie, I think the original, which was in 1956, contemporaneous with the release of the novel, basically, is good. I kind of assumed, especially with a title like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it sounds very silly and B-movie.
Yeah.
And it's black and white. And to a certain extent, it is a bit B-movie, but it is powerful. Like, it's one of those B-movies that actually kind of almost deserves to be an A-movie because it's unsettling. This movie's unsettling in a different way. That movie is very unsettling, not just for its time, but I just remember watching it and thinking, my God, this really holds up until the end. And the end is not as bleak as the end is of this movie. And the novel ending is also not bleak. I guess I might as well say it. The way that the novel ends is that the pod people who are invading Earth to kind of realize that the Earthlings are putting up a bit more of a struggle than they expected, and so they just kind of leave. Because this is sort of what they do. They go to different planets and try to take over and evolve. The ending of the original movie wraps it up in a nice little bow. Like, the authorities are onto it, and it looks like everything's going to be solved.
Right, but this one doesn't.
This one doesn't. And thank God it doesn't, because I think it suits the material so much better. And obviously, we'll talk about all this more, but I just had to get all that out. Yeah. Like, seriously, another great actor, Kevin McCarthy, so good.
Yes!
I love him, and he is in the original, and he has a cameo in this one that has just made me chuckle.
God, I knew nothing about this going in. I hadn't read anything. I mean, I know what it's about. It's the invasion, like, pod people. I know what it's
in the title.
Yeah, I know what it's about. And I've definitely seen clips from it, including, like the last image from the movie is iconic. I've seen it a million times, but never in context.
Right. And thank God for that, actually, because I wasn't.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming, but I was so excited. But what was his name? Kevin, did you say?
Kevin McCarthy, the actor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He gets hit by a car and he's shouting some line.
They're coming! They're coming! Help! Help! They're coming! They're coming! Listen to me! Listen! Help me! You're next, please! Please! You're next! We're in danger! Please, listen to me! Something terrible! Please! You're next! Here they are! They're already here! Come! You're next! They're coming! They're coming!
I was like, oh my gosh. A, what is happening? B, I know that guy. Every time Kevin McCarthy shows up in a movie, I'm like, isn't that guy from Inner Space? Like, that's not even one of his big movies.
Oh, it's so funny.
But that's the movie that I remember him from. Yeah, it wasn't until afterwards that I looked it up and I was like, oh my gosh, that was a cameo. He was the lead guy in the original.
Don't feel bad about thinking of Inner Space first, because the first thing I think of when I think of Kevin McCarthy is UHF. The Weird Al Yankovic movie. He is so great in that. Oh, but he is a goofball in that movie. But anyway, we're not talking about Kevin McCarthy either.
He's great. No, we're not talking. No,
well, I mean, we can, but
okay. I just want to be upfront and say I actually really liked this movie.
Yeah, me too.
A lot.
Me too.
I liked it a lot, and Donald Sutherland is a huge part of that. But the other part of it is that it just starts and then it just keeps going.
Yes.
And when I saw that it was an hour and 55 minutes long, I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna be so long. No.
Right?
Things are moving the whole time from the very beginning.
And yet, it's not like a modern take on this would be. It moves in a different way. Modern movies, they move with a lot of action, and there's like lots of call outs and things, like almost like you're dumb. I feel like modern blockbuster films feel like they really need to tell everything straight out to the audience and leave no room for thought, just boom, 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 from one thing to the next.
Right.
This movie is so striking in that it moves and it's compelling, but it's told in a very old-style way, 1970s-style way of being subtle, being quiet, being realistic.
Yeah.
It's got a grittiness to it because it takes place in the city in San Francisco. That's one of the things that they updated, from the original. The original, it's like small town.
Okay.
It's almost like your standard sci-fi B-movie thing, right? It's always like the evil starts in a small town or the aliens start in a small town where everybody can easily and quickly get overwhelmed. But then when the big city boys come in, the army gets called in and the tanks roll in and then it's all over for the aliens, usually, right? This brought it to San Francisco, so immediately the problem is clearly not going to get solved that easily, because if the aliens can overwhelm San Francisco so quickly and so easily with all the authorities and all the power, like, what hope do we have? What's the next level that's going to save us? So I thought that was very effective, and I love seeing just the little bits and pieces and just the little nods and the little touches that happen almost in the background at times. Blink and you miss it.
Oh, yeah.
Of, sinister things are happening.
Yeah, tons of great background stuff going on, especially in the beginning.
The point I'm trying to make is it's just so respectful of its audience. You know, it's a piece of art that has layers and it expects you to catch things. And if you don't, it's okay. But like, it's not spoon feeding this stuff to us. And yet it still moves. I love these kind of movies.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't know that it necessarily expects you to catch things. Of course, filmmaking is, you know, a conglomerate of people working together on things, but the people who are making these decisions are ensuring that there are little details in the background that some filmmakers wouldn't concern themselves with.
Yes.
And that's not entirely fair. I'm just saying there are, like, if you're just watching the people in the scene who are talking, you're going to get everything you need. But if you also pay attention to the things and the actors behind them, especially early on, one of the things that I love most about this movie is that it's just like, the aliens are here and they're everywhere.
Yes. It's constant paranoia, right? Like, once you notice, like, you can't help but be looking in the background and realizing, like, wait, is he an alien? Wait, he's got to, maybe she is too. Yeah, it's like the whole thing.
Because they're just standing there, like, staring. And I do love that, too. I agree with you. I feel like modern filmmakers feel like they have to show us everything. And I'm sure they're right. We have super limited attention spans.
Yeah,
these days.
Maybe they've helped with that, though. That's kind of what I think.
Maybe I don't know. But they got to be flashy. They got to keep us interested. They got to keep us off our phones. This movie doesn't have to do that. I'm still intrigued. The one thing that was a little funny to me, and again, loved it, was the very opening.
Yeah,
where it opens on an alien planet full of like jellyfish
floating up into space,
and then the jellyfish fly to the earth and turn into gloopy rain. I loved all those shots of the like gloop like hanging off the plants and stuff. And then they start growing spores and little pods and little flowers. And I loved it. I'm like, yes, I love this.
It's kind of like a harkening back, I think, also to the 1950s B-movie roots. Like, even those first scenes, like, they look so B-movie, just colorized.
Uh-huh.
But like you said, it's like, it's very obvious. The spores, they're landing, they're little jelly things, and then, like, the flowers sprout, and the girls come and they pick them, and they're like, oh, what pretty flowers. And the teacher in the park is like, go ahead, pick all the pretty flowers you can find.
Yeah.
And our main character also grabs what it takes one home, and this is 5 minutes into the movie. Like, we are set.
Yes.
We know what's happening.
Yeah, and she puts it in the vase right next to the bed, right next to her boyfriend. And then the next morning, again, we are like 5 minutes into this movie. Then the very next morning, her boyfriend is acting weird.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny.
One of the things that's in the background, I'm going to bring it up now because it bothered me throughout the whole movie, was there are they are just collecting garbage all day, every day.
Yes.
And I kept like, every time someone would go dump something in the garbage, I'm like, what is that? Like,
right?
It was always the same thing. It was never actual garbage. It was just like some kind of silky
gray stuff.
And as it turns out, it's the remains of the people that these pod people are replacing. That's also something that I didn't know. The point that I was trying to get at is it's literally like 5 to 7 minutes into the movie when she goes to her friend, Donald Sutherland, who's a health inspector of all things.
Of course. She just works down the hall from him, right? She's in the lab. I don't know, the public lab where they do maybe forensic analysis and stuff as well as whatever, I guess.
Yeah, but 5 to 7 minutes into it, she's like, that's not my husband.
Mm-hmm.
He's something else. He's different on the inside.
Yeah.
I was so surprised that it happened so quickly.
Yeah.
And it just continues to happen so quickly. Like, Sutherland's name is Matthew Bennell. I call him Matt because we're friends. But Matt goes to the dry cleaner, and the dry cleaner is like, my wife, it's not her. There's something wrong. She's different. It's not her. Like, this is happening everywhere. And in the background, while people are having these conversations, there was one scene in particular where I think they were in their offices. I think you're right. I think they're in the same building. But they're walking down the hall, and they walk past a door, and there's just a woman standing, staring out the window. And they just walk past her. But that happens repeatedly, and this invasion happens so fast.
Yeah.
But I love that. I actually think I think it's genius.
You know, honestly, post-COVID, I have no complaints about that. We've seen how fast things can spread.
This is an alien plant.
It's an alien plant with spores that I don't even know how close you have to be to it or exactly how it gets to you.
It seems like you just have to be close to it. You have to be close to it.
And asleep.
And when you're asleep, then you get really chapped lips. Your cheeks start to like flake. And eventually I think you're supposed to kind of be surrounded in like tendrils, but they kind of drop that after a while.
Yeah.
That just kind of stops happening.
Or maybe it happens quickly and then goes away. So by the time... Like, I don't know. I feel like it's just it has to be a very, very fast process. Like, super fast.
I knew, again, I had the general idea of what this movie was. But when I heard Invasion of the Body Snatchers, I assumed that something got into these people and stole their bodies.
Yes.
I didn't know that it was a whole other thing. Like, that was a surprise to me. I didn't know that.
Ultimately, what it is it's duplicating them.
Yeah.
It's duplicating their bodies, and then their original body just basically shrivels into a husk. And supposedly, I guess some of their personality and stuff is still in there, but they're devoid of basically their humanity.
Spock says later... Leonard Nimoy is in this. Spock says later that, like, all of your memories, like, will be transferred, but you won't have any emotion. Like, you won't have hate or fear or... I mean, we're jumping all over the place. This is near the end of the movie.
Right.
I mean, that's exactly what a pod person would say. You'll like it. You'll like it better. Don't worry. It's better.
It's better. We all float down here.
I'm just gonna kill you, and I'll take your memories, but it's fine. Don't worry about it.
It's interesting because these movies and the novel itself have all been, discussed as in terms of political situations. Like, back in the 50s, this was seen as a metaphor for McCarthyism and the communist Red Scare. And that is something that the novelist absolutely denied. And the people who were making the movie denied and said, we're really just making a thriller. We didn't put that stuff in there. Later on, the director of the movie did admit, he's like, look, I mean, it couldn't be avoided that people would draw these kinds of conclusions, about the film. But, I didn't actually try to make the movie about this, but I was very aware that people might draw these conclusions. This is a different time. This is the 70s, and in some ways, the director here, Philip Kaufman, seems to have kind of a slightly different agenda that is in keeping with the times. This is the era of self-help and movements and new agey stuff. And it's interesting that we've got this prominent psychiatrist in here that is played by Leonard Nimoy that you said. Interesting to see Leonard Nimoy in a role that's not Spock. Right? He was, I think...
I know, it's weird.
Trying for years to escape that. And he's a damn good actor.
Yeah.
I've always felt that Spock was an easy character to play.
Or a really hard character to play.
Maybe.
To keep that interesting.
Oh, to keep it interesting for sure, I guess. And then they did play with Spock too, right? Like,
yeah.
He kind of like got a bit of human emotion and kind of learned things. Like, there's layers to Spock. But he could never really escape the Spock character and get those roles. In this movie, I read that he was cast in this partly because he did want to escape that, but also they were thinking, yeah, but eventually he does kind of turn into Spock. He turns into a similar character, so it kind of worked for him too. In that way, they knew he could pull that off. But yeah, he's like this self-help guru. And I feel like we keep bringing this up in these movies from this era that because it was trendy at the time, the psychiatry and psychology, we saw in The Exorcist when we talked about it, when all the psychiatrists and psychologists are sitting around and talking about, well, what are the psychological reasons for her issues? And the horror movies of this time, it seems like there's always a psychiatrist or a psychologist who's coming in to give that scientific explanation. Because it was like a big deal at this time. So I think, they were really playing into the pop culture. And this movie's no different. We have a psychiatrist here who's super famous. He's kind of a guru. He's written books. He's introduced to us at a book signing that they go to because he's a friend of Sutherland's. Matthew suggests to Elizabeth,
Do you want to go see my friend David Kibner?
The psychiatrist?
Not like that. I mean, you talk to him, he will put things into perspective for you.
I'm not crazy.
No, I'm serious. He would eliminate a lot of things. He would eliminate whether Jeffrey was having an affair, whether he'd become gay, whether he would had a social disease, whether he'd become a Republican. All the alternatives, all the things that could have happened to him to have made you feel that he had changed, something that he was doing. You know what I mean? You want to go see him?
maybe this is reflective of your relationship with your husband. Because you get the feeling that it hasn't been horrible, but there's a little distant from her.
Well, and she definitely wants to bone Donald Sutherland.
She does, but she resists. And that was surprising. They have an interesting tension between them, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, they are coworkers, they're friends. Like, she goes and talks to him about her relationship concerns. He's the first one that she goes to when she's convinced that her husband is not her husband. They do have this great relationship, but again, it's that Donald Sutherland thing where he's like making them dinner or whatever, and they're just having a very innocent conversation, but just the way that he's looking at her, I'm like, sexy eyes. I see what you're doing there, Mr. Sexy Eyes.
There's a bit of flirtatiousness there, but it's almost like they do consciously.
It's innocent.
Yeah.
But it's definitely flirty. And he's wearing a cardigan. I swear to God, I did read somewhere that there was like a theory that this is his favorite cardigan, but it's not true. But as soon as I saw him in that cardigan, I remembered Animal House, because in Animal House, he's like naked except in this cardigan. And it looks just like this one. And that's how I think of Donald Sutherland.
Naked in a cardigan.
Totally. Such a cute butt in that movie. Go back and watch that movie. Ooh, what a cute butt Donald Sutherland. But I kind of wanted to go back to what you were saying. This movie, like, yes, in the 50s, it resonated for a particular reason. In the 70s, it resonated for a particular reason. I feel like there have been at least 2 or 3 more iterations of it, and for whatever reason, it always resonates with something. You and I should write a movie now where the threat is AI.
Yeah.
Like the invasion of the Body Snatchers is AI, because they're going to come and they're going to take over our personalities in our lives, and they'll be like, you don't need to be alive. I remember everything, you know.
Right?
But I feel like if something came out now, it would resonate for that reason. Like, because it's always about like how you're not really in control of your life.
Right. Maybe our biggest fear is losing our humanity, and we see even threats within ourselves, you know, and our systems and things like that will deprive us of our humanity or convince us that we don't need it anymore, or we'll be better off without these things that quote unquote make us human. Because you can continue to live and do things and whatnot, but you'll be lacking
but not. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's what the plant aliens say. Like, you'll still be here, but no, like, you will be dead. The copy of you will be dead, and you will be that weird ashy stuff in the garbage trucks.
Yep.
Which, again, I didn't know. I didn't really understand what was happening. This whole thing, like you already talked about them going to the Leonard Nimoy's book signing. While there, they also run into
Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, Jeff Goldblum.
I did not expect that.
I didn't even know Jeff Goldblum was in this movie.
I didn't either.
And he's like 15 years old. No, I'm just kidding.
He's super
young. He's an adult, but he's so young. He's so young, and he's just there, and I don't even know who he is. He's like just like some
Jack.
weird poet or
He's
something.
a poet. He's the guy who's railing against the system and how, oh, no, nobody cares about art anymore. Nobody cares about the things that make us human. You know, he's the guy kind of at the extreme of this, the hippie, more or less, I think.
He was so frantic, I didn't really know what was happening. It was weird.
All he does is like rail, and he sounds very like upset that he's not as successful as this guy is, and the books of poetry that he's written aren't as successful as this guy's self-help book. And
oh gosh. So then he's there, and then he's also married to Veronica Cartwright.
oh, Jesus.
I didn't know she was in this movie either.
I didn't either.
She plays Nancy, and she's also very young. Like, they're supposed to be this young couple that's weird.
Yeah, right. They own a spa.
They own a weird mud spa? Was that a thing?
I think it still is.
Oh, that grosses me out.
Well, their
Like,
spa grosses me out. I mean, I would want a spa that didn't look like that. Let's just put it that way. It's just kind of...
Yeah, it's got like... Oh, it's so gross. Like, just like clear... Like, it kind of looks like a meat locker.
It does.
Like, it's just like clear plastic, like shower curtains dividing things. And just a room with like 3 tubs full of mud with disgusting fat guys just like cooking in there. Not to shame disgusting fat guys. I mean, that would, you know, disgusting fat guy strong. But I would not want to go sit in some other guy's mud. Like,
No.
the mud just must... That's gross.
Especially when it starts
Disgusting.
bubbling. And
I know. It looks like... I feel like they almost made it look like it was farts. Like,
yeah, they did.
it seemed like the bubbles like came up from between the
Between
guy's
their legs. Yeah. Oh, God.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, they just do. They like own this mud spa or whatever. But then she's like trying to close up, and she thinks her husband is laying flat on his back with the blankets pulled all the way over his face on one of the like spa tables. So she pulls it down. This bothers me a little bit because it's amorphous. Like, it's clearly a person, but it's kind of covered in like thin tendrils, like almost like a silky cocoon kind of thing.
Almost like the veins on the back of a leaf. As you know, if you kind of took that and made it semi-translucent, just wet it and laid it over somebody.
And I like it. I like the look of it. What bothers me is that for the rest of the movie, they don't know yet, and we don't know yet, that what these little flower pods are doing is duplicating people. But from this point on, when we see it happening, it is entirely evident who is being duplicated. Like, why is it not Jeff Goldblum on the table? I don't know. Maybe it's not far enough into the process or something. I don't know. Or maybe it's just for plot because they don't know yet that that's what's happening. They don't know who that is, so they don't know what's happening.
Yeah,
But this just goes on. It just goes on for so long. I don't know specific parts to point out because they're just, I don't know. People are getting duplicated and the main people are running around like kind of figuring things out. But I guess what's ultimately interesting to me is they kind of know what's happening from the beginning.
Yeah.
Or like from pretty early on. And then it's about them trying to thwart it at first. They're like, oh, we can stop this. We just got to contact the right people. But they can't because it has immediately spread everywhere. And it seems like everybody except them are these pod people.
pretty much. You get to see the full thing only much later when it attempts to get Donald Sutherland's character as he falls asleep. So it is a little, like you said, and I think this is kind of what you're trying to say, it's a little like unclear and maybe a little unrealistic exactly how all this could happen so fast to all these people, and only these like few people really are clued into it.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody's got to fall asleep, they've got to be near one of these plants, then the tendrils kind of overtake the plant for at least 5 minutes. They're going to be gross and weird, and then this pod's going to be next to them. That's the thing I didn't understand about the guy on the table. Like, this big pod then like opens up a flower, and then this crazy birthing process, like kind of like a cloning of a half-formed human, except it's a full-size adult, comes out of this pod, and then the original person just shrivels up into apparently a husk. We never really see that. We start to see it on her later, but anyway.
Kind of at the end, yeah.
And then these husks are then disposed of by the duplicate or maybe one of their cohorts. Because one of the things that's happening early on in the movie, one of the mysteries to solve is her husband, Elizabeth's husband, Jeffrey, when she's like, he's not right. Like, he's not going to work. He's like walking around town. He's meeting with strangers. They're exchanging packages and walking away. And so, I like the way that the movie layers this mystery on. Like, the pod people are here. You know that the aliens are here and they're infecting people, but you don't exactly know all the details.
Right. But I like that, too, because all these things are intriguing and they're all happening in plain sight. I think that that's what this movie plays to with audiences, too, is just paranoia.
Yes.
Like, all of this nefarious stuff is happening in plain sight, and it's happening all around you, and it's the people that you know, and everybody is conspiring except for you.
Right.
That plays for me. Like, I get it. Well, I'm going to be probably walking around now, like, looking at people like...
Well, and this is interesting too, and I think why, updating it for a modern era would be so interesting, because now we seem like awash in conspiracy theories, and I have friends who I feel like they've kind of gone crazy because they've gone down rabbit holes feeling like the whole world, and they're one of the few people in the know. This movie and movies like this and stories like this posit that they're right. That's what the story is anyway, and that's exactly what paranoid people do. So in the same sense, like, I don't think it's completely unbelievable that at first, even though it's almost obvious that these educated people, one of them is a health inspector. He's out there trying to dig up deception. He's out there finding the rat turds in the soup that the kitchen is hoping is going to go unnoticed and that they're trying to hide and they're coming up with excuses for. No, he's going to find it. She's a lab technician. She tests and tests and tests things. One of the first things she does when she gets one of those cute little flowers is try to identify it. And when she can't, she wants to take it to the lab and test it. This is before she thinks anything's wrong. Like, this is these people's personalities. And the psychologist, right, is all about, the answers are not the crazy, sinister things that you think they are. They are rooted in your life and your relationships with other people. That's where it's coming from. It's deep within your psyche is why you're having these things.
But he's placating and gaslighting her, because I think that he is a pod person from the time we meet him.
You think so?
Yeah.
Huh.
I think so for sure.
I don't think so.
I think he's totally... I mean, it wouldn't be out of character for him to come up with an actual psychological explanation for what's going on. But he's... I just feel like I think he's a pod person from the beginning, from the time that we meet him.
It's unclear. It could very well be. That's a very solid theory.
The thing that you said that resonated with me, you're like, we look at these characters, these well-educated, intelligent people, and we think, how could they not see what's going on? I think that that's a big part of what this story plays into as well.
Yes.
Because haven't you felt that way personally?
Right.
How do these intelligent, well-educated people, how do they think this?
Right.
I can't understand. And sometimes you feel, or I have in my experience, in certain company, felt very alone. Like, I'm the only person who feels this way. Like, what is happening?
So it goes both ways, right? Like, it just adds to the paranoia of life. At some point, if you're smart, you're kind of looking at yourself and going, am I the crazy one? I could be the crazy one.
Right.
Right. And that's what smart people do. Maybe that's why this movie resonates so much, is that this just taps into a deep fear in all of us, and this sort of anxiety that maybe we all have about ourselves, like, maybe I'm the crazy one. And so that's why, I think it makes sense that these guys at first, even though there's all this evidence and stuff around them, are in denial. But then they can't deny it anymore because it freaking happens. It starts happening in front of them. And I think once they figure out more or less what's going on, and it's this group, right, then Sutherland realizes they can't fall asleep, and so they're over at someone's house, and I feel like I'm probably skipping around.
Well, we have to. I mean, so much of it is just us and them kind of slowly figuring out what's going on. But meanwhile, also, more and more people... Eventually, it gets to the point where basically everybody except our core group of Donald Sutherland and his not girlfriend, but they love each other or whatever, and the other couple,
Jeff Goldblum, Jack, and Nancy.
They're just kind of against everybody else, and they're running and they're getting chased, and
they end up hiding in shadow in the apartment. Jack can't get anything on the radio. David, the psychiatrist, gives Elizabeth a pill to help her sleep. There's like just a slow, quiet terror in all this. Like, what the hell can they do? Matthew goes up to the roof to stare out at the city, and he starts to nod off, and he does. And this is when we first see all this happen. There are tendrils in this grass that's up on the roof. I guess it's like a bunch of plants up there.
Really confused what was... All of a sudden, he was like in troll land.
Yeah.
Like, there's like mystical vines everywhere and huge pods. Is he not the only one in there? Because it seemed... Were they like multiple duplicating him? I didn't understand what was happening because it seemed like more than one. And also, okay, I can deal with this. Like the alien goo comes, it turns into these little flowers, it starts killing people. Maybe the pods can start getting bigger because they don't have to worry about being conspicuous. So I'm not concerned about the fact that now the pods are enormous and they are birthing full-grown hairless people. But then those people immediately mature. Like there is a duplicate Donald Sutherland lying right next to him until he wakes up and like stomps its head or something.
Yeah, exactly. He comes back and smashes his own head in it. That's kind of nice. I think the original movie, if I'm remembering it correctly, one of the things that shocked me about it at that time was that they find the pods pretty early. Like, there are pods growing in the basement of this guy's house. I think there's a greenhouse full of pods. They are fully aware that there are giant pods out and about. The thing is that there's very little they can do about it. And so I thought that was interesting, whereas this movie, we don't really see the pods. Yeah, I mean, they're tiny ones, but we don't really see the giant pods or whatever until this moment, until much later. It's got more of a build to it. But yeah, I agree with you. And that was like kind of a weird thing. Like, number one, okay, so he didn't notice all this stuff around him when he was up there? Or did it suddenly just all climb up on the roof with him while he was...
Where did it come from?
And then this giant pod manifests so quickly, like... And then how is this happening at everyone's home? I mean, I didn't really get that.
I don't know, but obviously now they kind of know what's going on. At some point, Jack gets separated from them, and then the next time we see him, he's a pod person, and Leonard Nimoy is a pod person, and he tries to explain... He's telling them, he has a whole monologue about how we travel on the solar winds or something, right? And we go from planet to planet, and like he paints them, whatever they are, as being almost like philanthropic. Like, we're here to help. Like,
yeah,
people suck, so we're gonna eliminate emotion, so there's no hate and war and
yeah, you'll be born again into an untroubled world, free of anxiety, fear, hate, and then at the last minute, kind of off screen, he says, and love, almost like it's thrown in there. But that's the most sinister bit, right? Is like, oh, wait a minute. I mean, at first you're kind of, I mean, I'm not along with the ride, but I mean, I'm saying like, it doesn't sound horrible, like free of anxiety, fear, hate, and love. Oh yeah, love is an emotion too that you're going to give up when you're one of these pod people. Like, it's all part of the package, folks. Look, we just finished watching Inside Out 2, which, by the way, was a lovely movie.
Oh, good.
All these emotions are part of what's being human, you know? And so that's another thing that this kind of toys with, right? Is like, you can't just take away those things without also taking away something that is very much makes us who we are and is the counterbalance to the things that we consider the more desirable emotions and feelings, you know, which is interesting. It's interesting. I mean, it's not like the movie goes into great detail on that, but yeah, your mind and memories will be totally absorbed and everything else will remain intact. And this part when he is injecting Donald Sutherland, and Sutherland just looks at him and he's like, David, you're killing me, David. Man, I was just like, this is his friend, you know, and he's just looking at him, and there's only thing he can say is, David, you're killing me. A pleading. God, he's such a good actor.
Yeah, he's fantastic. But it doesn't have any effect on Leonard Nimoy because Leonard Nimoy is not Leonard Nimoy anymore.
He's not David.
Yeah, this guy, Donald Sutherland, is pleading to his friend. That's not his friend. He may have all of his friend's memories. God, I feel like I've already mentioned it. I have already mentioned it once, but also in Troll, when the young kid he thinks there's something wrong with his sister. He's watching a movie on TV, on a black and white TV, and it's like, that may look like Tweety. It may even sing like Tweety, but it's not. And the woman goes, are you saying yes? Your Tweety is a pod person from the planet Mars. And it's just a fake movie in that movie. But it's obviously a riff on this, and it's really funny. But that's what it is. It's not Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
They can't be reasoned with.
But they're also not, according to him, they're not sinister either. He says, we don't hate you.
No.
There's no need for hate now or love. And then Elizabeth immediately turns to Matthew and says, I love you, Matthew.
I love you.
Yeah, that was
They also kiss at some point.
later. But I just thought that was the first time that she flat out admitted, okay, yeah, I love you, Matthew. And he doesn't respond back, I love you too, or anything like that. But later, he's compelled to tell her he loves her.
Right.
And God,
I mean, we might as well just say he's compelled to tell her because though they run and fight and try to call all these, you know, like he tries to call the local cops, he tries to call the FBI, he tries to call Washington. And every time he gets on the phone with somebody, they're like, oh, yes, we know who you are, Doctor, your name. And he's like, how do you know my name? Like,
wait right there.
everybody is in on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
So there's no getting away, but they keep trying. Eventually, they're in some like shipyard or something because these pod people have a distribution center.
Yes.
And it's very efficient. Like they are loading up trucks and buses and ships. And they've also got like a huge greenhouse for all of these pods, and
they've learned the ways of Earth very, very quickly.
Oh,
I would
yeah.
have to think there are other
Commerce.
planets out there just like Earth for them to have sorted all this out within the matter of a few days, a week? I don't know how much time passed, but
they're
it's
sending pods to Sausalito and all over the place.
it's so true. You'd think they could just rain down on the planet everywhere. I mean, that would be easier.
Right? I don't know. But Donald Sutherland and the girl that he loves, like, I don't know, they're like on the outskirts of this thing or whatever. First of all, Spock sedated both of them. He gave them injections of a sedative. That would knock them out. They are not going to be...
They took speed before that, remember? Just before.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, remember?
No, I didn't.
She found some pills in the lab.
I do remember he said, like, how many does it say to take? And she's like, 1. And he said, okay, I'll take 5. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was the only way.
So they stayed awake for a minute, but then I guess she falls asleep and he's like trying to wake her up and her face is getting fuzzy because that's what happens.
Yeah.
And he's like, I love you. And then she dies.
Yeah. He was really sad.
She disintegrates in his arms. I don't know that I would say it was sad.
Really? I don't know. I felt this was a pretty emotional scene just because I really bought their relationship and I thought it was cute and I thought it was sweet. Because like I said, there is a very specific moment in this movie where they could have just jumped into bed together and they didn't. You know, in a way, nobody would have blamed them either, but they didn't. And even until this dire circumstance, neither of them did anything to like profess their love to each other. And now they're forced to, and it's too late because they're going to be stripped of all feelings of love very, very quickly. And it's like a last gasp of humanity. And I just thought this personalized it very, very well. And I was just in it. I just was in it with this couple that wasn't a couple.
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, I don't have any problem with their relationship. I think their relationship was perfectly appropriate. They were coworkers. They kind of had a flirty thing going on, but she was in a relationship, so they didn't pursue it.
Yeah.
Then once her guy was out of the picture and they were in dire circumstances together, then they could, talk about their true feelings. That's fine. I found the scene more devastating than sad because sure, like he loves her or whatever, that it's not like they're married, it's not like they have some deep connection.
Right.
But she is also his last companion.
Yes. He's going to have no one else.
Yeah, you're alone in the world. Like, it's literally you against everybody now. Now, the other Nancy is still out there somewhere.
That's true. Because Nancy and Jack at some point sorted out that they could hide among the pod people if you just kind of act like them. If you don't show emotion, you can walk around and kind of get in their lines and kind of go through their thing without being detected. But the minute you show emotion, which happens when a dog with a human face runs up to Elizabeth? What was that shit?
There had been this homeless guy throughout the movie who played the guitar and sang, and I read that at least the guitar, if not the vocals, were Jerry Garcia.
Really? What?
Yeah.
Wow.
Playing. I don't know. I think I don't know. It was definitely him playing. But this homeless guy that like they liked, and he had like this nice dog that they liked, and you see him a couple times in the beginning, and then at one point when the two of them, Donald Sutherland and the lady, are running away together, he sees them asleep on the ground and he tries to wake them up, but he can't, and so they keep running. But he kicks the pod, and the pod like shoots out some goo. Now, I didn't really understand if that was the reason why then later why all of a sudden the dog had the homeless guy's face.
I missed all
was
that.
Was it a result?
Totally...
Was it a result of Donald Sutherland kicking the pod? I don't know. But it was weird and creepy, and it freaked Elizabeth out, and that, triggered everybody. Once Elizabeth is dead, and she like withers away in his arms, but then her nude doppelganger pops up just feet away and it's like, it's great, you'll like it,
come join me
us or whatever. He runs away, and then he has a huge action sequence in this like pod nursery that, good for him for going out with a bang, but really doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. I have to admit, like, you said that this didn't feel long. Here it started to feel long because it just keeps piling on the hopelessness that I was like, there's no way this is going to end. And the minute he comes across the pod nursery, I was thinking, man, they spent a lot of time and money on this scene, which was kind of unnecessary because we've seen their sophisticated organization. There are probably nurseries like this everywhere. So I can't really get behind him. I mean, good for him, again, like destroying it and sending it up in flames, but it's not like it was the last one on Earth, and now we have a chance.
Donald Sutherland doing all his own stunts.
Oh, yeah?
This actually reminded me of that scene in Don't Look Now. There was an action sequence where he was, like, jumping and falling on scaffolding, right? Wasn't there?
He almost fell, because they were repairing the frescoes or whatever on the ceiling of one of the chapels. Mm-hmm.
This, I mean, it's pointless. He's not really doing anything to save the world or whatever, but he does destroy this nursery, and he's jumping from level to level and doing all of his own stunts. And it's a fun action sequence.
Sure, yeah.
And then I don't even remember what happens after that. He just runs away, right?
Yeah, he does. He just runs away, and I think it's morning.
And then somebody, I think it's Spock, says, "We'll get him. He can't stay awake forever." And then the next scene, it's daytime. And we see Matt, Donald Sutherland, on the street, and everything seems normal. Like, all the people seem normal. They're like kids going to school.
Well, they're busing in kids for field trips that they're guiding them to these special places. Like, I thought that was hilarious.
Matt goes to his lab and
Flips something out of the paper.
yes, because that was something that he did before. Like, that was one of his quirks. Like, he clipped newspaper clippings or whatever. But he sees Elizabeth, like, through a window, but she doesn't see him and pays no notice. So, obviously, what you're asking yourself is, has he been duplicated, or is he just acting? Because Nancy told him, you can act, and she's been acting, and she's been walking amongst them for a long time because she figured it out. Just don't show any emotion. So that's what we, the viewers, are asking ourselves. At the end of the day, at the end of the workday, he falls in line with all the other people leaving, and then he's out just walking on the street.
By himself.
And Janet kind of approaches him. Like, she calls his name from across the street, like, Matt. And she just like waves at him a little bit. And he points and throws his head back and shrieks. We haven't even said that.
No.
The pod people shriek and like point.
Yeah. It's like an alarm system.
It's like an alarm system. But that, again, I said earlier, this last image of the movie, Donald Sutherland throws his head back and contorts his jaw in a really unnatural way and just glares at her, pointing. And I have no idea if the shriek was actually him or if it was ADR or whatever, but it's very scary and completely bleak. There is no other way, really, for this to turn out.
No.
But it's confirmed, they win. They win.
Yeah.
And I think that you had alluded to in the 56 version, this scene is different. Like, the two people meet on the street, but they kind of give each other a wink and a nod, like things are going to be okay.
Well,
or like the military is coming or something like that.
In the 50s version, the producers made them tack on an ending that the original director, Don Siegel, did not want. But, they were the producers, and so they got what they wanted, where the FBI calls the CIA, and, like, there's just this sense like, all right, now the big boys are on it, we're going to get them, and it's kind of like the government's involved, and they know what's going on, and so now this is the end. It's not like, the big title card comes and says the aliens were driven off, but that's the sense that you get. Their original ending that was written for the movie was more bleak, was kind of like this, where I believe he was walking down the street, and he just saw a truck full of pods just going right past him. And, nothing he could do about it. And the movie sort of ended on that note. And I think they restored that ending for re-releases. Even theatrical re-releases, I believe, ended up restoring that ending. So I can't remember which ending I saw. I'm pretty sure the one I saw felt more pat. But yeah, this ending, I think, was also brainstormed with the original director and screenwriter, Don Siegel. By the way, Don Siegel, the director of the 50s version, has a cameo as the taxi driver.
Yeah.
In this movie. And so they actually chatted with Philip Kaufman and Jack Finney to brainstorm this ending to make something a little different. And I think, God, it's so effective. And Donald Sutherland is so great.
Yeah, fantastic.
He's got a face for this, too.
I may be conflating stories. I hope not. But I think that the studio wanted Philip Kaufman to shoot a different ending, a more hopeful ending. And he just didn't shoot it because he was afraid they would use it. He wanted this bleak ending. And yeah, that final image of Donald Sutherland shrieking, it's iconic. As is Donald Sutherland. I mean, again, I've said it already. I'll say it again. What an amazing career.
Yeah.
What an amazing legacy. Like, as of this recording, he passed away a few days ago. And I've been reading the things that his contemporaries say about him. And they just say that he was just lovely and a gentleman and a hard worker and a brilliant actor. And, Kiefer, his son, tweeted or X'd or whatever it's called now, a tribute to his dad, and just seemed like such a cool guy. And I'm sad that he's gone. But again, he was old and he had a good life. If I make it to 88 and I'm healthy enough that I can keep working, I will consider that a huge success. But I also feel like Donald Sutherland is among the last of a generation of actors, the likes of which we won't see again, I think.
You mean guys that are just good at everything and can continue to work and do important roles well into old age? Is this what you mean?
And that their success is most largely based on their talent. Donald Sutherland is not necessarily... Again, I find him very sexually attractive. But he's not a stereotypically handsome guy.
No.
Again, not to discredit. I know there are many, many, many young, talented actors and actresses out there today. But so much is dependent upon look. And these older guys didn't have to be hot to be successful. And I feel like he's kind of among the last of that generation. Martin Sheen is still out there. There are other guys who are still working because they should be, because they're very talented. But I'm afraid we're going to continue to lose them because that's the nature of things. And even, talking about this and thinking about this and talking about him, I was really thinking you and I are probably not all that far off before the people that we grew up with and
are all gone.
Yeah.
God.
Time. It's a crazy thing, but if you are fortunate enough and talented enough and hardworking enough, you Donald Sutherlands of the world, you can leave your mark, and he certainly did.
He sure did. Oh, I love watching him. I'll watch anything with him in it, honestly. And there's a lot of stuff to watch with him in it. And there are other horror movies we can do that we haven't done yet that have him in it. So we will see him again.
Sure. Thankfully,
the nice thing about it is his work lives on. So
yeah, I'm interested. I don't know about whether or not for the show, but listeners, Mr. Harrigan's Phone was one of his most recent films. It's a Stephen King adaptation. I haven't seen it, but I'm interested. So if you recommend it, let me know.
Oh. Well, thank you so much for listening to this tribute episode. If you enjoyed it, you've got a Donald Sutherland fan among your friends, please send them this. Spread the word for us. You can find us online at chainsawhorror.com, anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcasts, as well as YouTube. Send us a review. Let us know what you think of this. Consider joining our patrons at patreon.com/chainsawpodcast and get a glimpse behind the scenes, as well as a lot of discussion going on at Christopher Pike Book Club, mini-sodes, written reviews, all kinds of fun stuff that you get for being a patron. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.